I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ who deals with drug and alcohol addiction as well as mental illness. My name is Randy. I grew up a son of a German immigrant. I was an only child, only grandchild. My dad was really closed off and constantly working, so it left me with my mother. My mother had mental health issues. I remember being, locked in closets, and I was never let out of the house. And then as I got older, I found some of her addiction issues. And when I hit my 20s, I started going to this church, and there was falling out, and I got mad, and I went as far away from Christ as I could, and that was when I really got sloppy. I jumped into, a cult lifestyle, and I was engaged. My fiance was Wiccan. I was dabbling in satanic and cult things. So I was surrounded by evil. Being bipolar and having OCD, I'm like a dog with a bone. So as soon as I grab a hold of something, drinking, drugs, passive suicide attempts, I was into self-harm, and this was a constant throughout my 20s. And I was still figuring out my life, and I eventually wound up taking care of my mother and dealing with her suicide attempts when my life was a complete train wreck. And then somehow I got my stuff together enough to go back to school. Even working on my master's degree, I was still drinking. I finished my degree a semester after I lost my mother at 52. I did everything I could, even in my dysfunctional state, for her. When 2020 hit, I was by myself. The only thing that was open was the grocery store and the liquor stores. I spent almost all my time drinking. I don't know what a functional alcoholic is, but I guess I was as close to one as possible. My world was it was totally out of control. You get to the point where you really don't care if you're around or not, and it's not always suicide, but sometimes it creeps up into that, and that's kind of where I got. It happened at work. I'd written a suicide note. A buddy of mine caught it at work, and I had to go through that whole thing. It was embarrassing, but wound up going through an outpatient hospitalization program. It was right around that time that I got down on my hands and knees. I just couldn't take it anymore. I begged God for a church home, for something to happen. And that very next day, one of the teachers that I work with came up to me and just randomly out of the blue asked me if I knew about this church and if I wanted to go. It couldn't be more out of the blue. It's a classic case of like God's calling, And this was the perfect place because as soon as I walked in the doors at the branch, I had this very loving atmosphere come about me. Celebrate Recovery was here. Everything was here that I needed to further my life and to keep living. Celebrate Recovery is a program for not just people like me, but anybody that's struggling with anything. I get to come around a lot of very like-minded individuals that are all seeking to get better, like really seeking to get better. And we get to worship together. We get to break bread together. We get to celebrate, quite literally, the milestones that we go through in our life. I wound up in an awesome step study. And if you're not familiar, step study, it's walking us through how to realize like what we are, what we've been through, what we need to do, and how to keep walking that out in our faith. The biggest thing that hit me during my recovery is the word control. I have none. Once you realize that and you give that up, then healing can begin, If you think you've got control over anything, you are in denial, and that's where I lived most of my life, just that constant state of denial. I'm coming up on 10 years off of opioids, about 4.5 years off alcohol, and I'm almost 3 years from any kind of like real suicide ideation. You know, my life has meaning, my life has purpose. If you look at me, you barely see me, you know, not wearing black. I'm more comfortable in the dark. You throw me in a room full of rainbows and I'm gonna lose my mind. You know, one of my tattoos, light and darkness, from John, and that's me. I feel like Christ has put that light in me, and now I'm able to be here, not only for me, but I can be there for others, which I get great gratification from. God wants me here so that I can keep recharging my batteries, so that I can be more effective out in the world. I love the Lord so much, and I'm just so thankful for. I'm thankful to be alive. So much of it that, you know, I was just wasting away, and I can see a future now on a lot of things that I didn't before.